Welcome to Forward Progress on the Hammer Betting Network on this Monday, February 5th. Today, we're going to be talking about the last game of the season, the Super Bowl, and how both teams match up against each other, as well as our approach on this specific game and how it might vary from our normal approach. Before we do and get into that, please like and subscribe to this content. It is greatly appreciated, helps boost us up in the algorithm. Also, fire away any questions you have in the comments. We will get to as many of them as we can. Of course, none of this will be possible without our sponsor, Pinnacle. They're the world's sharpest sports book and available to bettors in Ontario. Find out what the pros have known for the last 25 years. Everyday competitive odds, your trusted sports book. Bet smart, bet Pinnacle. Must be 19 plus in Ontario. I'm joined again this week by Cleve TA plus EV Bettor, cleveanalytics.com. Suma, pro sports bettor, creator on the Hammer Betting Network. Sharp Clark, NFL originator, betting analyst at 4for4.com. Gentlemen, I want to get the show on the road, but I kind of wanted to start by asking how this game differs than everything else. I know a lot of us like to play in the biggest market sides and totals, and we don't exactly focus on props, even though it might be part of our betting portfolio. How do you approach, Cleve, a game like this where it's the line of the total is, it's fairly efficient and there's a huge prop menu to attack?
Yeah, so I obviously, we think it's pretty efficient. So I don't even have a side or total on this game per se. Like I'm, kind of scouring the different prop offerings. There's so many of them, and it's really, really hard to narrow it down. As you try to do the best you can. And look, this is where I get my full income. So, it's probably less important for me to be looking for scalping opportunities. And because you could easily find multiple books and find plus money at, the same bet on multiple books and make money that way. And I know that a lot of the prop guys, they really focus in these 2 weeks, really attacking this market, because there are some soft lines when the kind of the non-traditional props that you see week in and week out. But for me, it's just really, I have a kind of a thesis on the game that I think, it may go. I find props that lend itself to that game flow, not heavily, because I don't want to be, too heavily weighted.
Yeah.
But I'll attack a couple of them and just kind of pick and choose, and I'll diversify and have a basket of kind of longer shot, low probability props as well, just because this is fun. This is the last game of the year. It's a Super Bowl. It's, for me, it's not meant to be like I'm not, like I said, I'm not making my annual income on this. So I try to have fun with it as much as I can and allocate a portion of it. So yeah, it's totally different than a week 10 regular season game where I'm, scouring through 16 games and trying to find good opportunities. So it's clearly different in that regard, but I enjoy it. It's the last game of the year. So it's probably the next NFL bet I'll make is in the draft in a couple months. So I'm trying to enjoy it as much as I can.
I was talking with Suma before we went on the stream this week. We're both kind of over it. Like, hurry up and let's get this game. Play it today if you have to. Suma, what are you doing this week? Are you spending extra time on the Super Bowl? Or are you starting to think about next year already?
I'm thinking about next year already. I will also dabble into some props, of course, but overall, these 2 weeks are not my thing at all. I just want this game to be played, and I'm basically already looking ahead to some off-season projects, modeling stuff, what I want to approach this off-season. I've been listening to 2 draft podcasts already. So content-wise, I'm not deeply into this into the Super Bowl, but it's basically just waiting 2 weeks for one single game, not like 8 games in a Sunday early slate or something. It's just one game, so let's get this one. And that's pretty much my week.
Yeah, so I have a list of podcasts that I listen to depending on the time of year, and right now all the football ones are off the list on Spotify, and then Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks's podcast go in the rotation now, and the one with Joe Marino goes in, and it's like, all right, let's shift to draft mode. Clark, how are you approaching this week? Is this usually a low volume game for you compared to others?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's only one game, right? I do recognize the potential for profiting on props at the Super Bowl is large because there are so many different ways to play every different angle. Whereas in a typical game, the amount of money you can get down on a specific angle in the prop market before those lines start moving is not that much. But I think with how many books are offering the props and how many different props there are, like if you think, Mahomes is going to have fewer sacks or get sacked fewer than anticipated, there's like 7 different markets to play that on. So by the time that you've got all those bets down, you got a pretty good amount. But I just don't have models for that kind of stuff. So for me, it's a regular side total evaluation, make the bet, find some props that like Cleve TA was saying, just, for fun, put some money on them, have a little checklist going into the game of, I need this to happen, I need this not to happen, and then just enjoy the game. But for the most part, this week's been building out programs for my off-season study that I'm going to do. So.
Yeah, I share in that situation. Cleve, I feel like talking about distractions is a shitty thing to handicap depending on what the distraction is. But I remember when Andy Reid's son had that drunk accident, my immediate thoughts were, as a father, how do you get yourself ready for a game knowing your son is going to jail and he was an assistant coach on the team? Patrick Mahomes' dad gets arrested with DWI. Do you even factor that in at all? Is this not a distraction at all?
I don't factor it in. Because I just have no idea, and nobody does. Every player handles those things differently. So, it could affect some and may affect others more. I just have no clue. I mean, I don't think we can blame the 31-9 loss to Tampa, where they had the Chiefs had no offensive line to Andy Reid's son issue. I just that's more coincidental, I would think, but. Yeah, that's not going to be part of my handicap at all, just because it's just impossible to do that. So yeah, it's not in my handicap process.
All right, Clark, what about familiarity with this game? It's a isolated game. It's 2 weeks in advance. They're both on the road. There's a lot of media. There's a lot of distractions. Do you ever favor the team that's been there before or versus a team that's never been there before? Or is it still in a bubble, this is how this team matches up against this team?
I think it can matter. It's not part of my model, so I'm not going to bet based on it. But I mean, look at last week. I thought that the Chiefs, frankly, handled themselves mentally better than the Ravens did. And I think that made a difference in the game. I don't think you can really predict that kind of stuff, but it's one of those, if it's going to impact the game, it's probably going to favor the team that has more experience being there. And you can just, the way the Chiefs handle themselves at this point, it's a lot of the same guys that have been there year after year, whether it's the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. A lot of these 49ers guys weren't on that squad that made the Super Bowl 4 years ago or 3 years ago. So I do think, if anything, it helps the Chiefs, but it's just not something I'm adding into my model.
Suma, what about, people love to quote Andy Reid is X and X off a bye, or Shanahan's X and X off a bye. They're both off a bye. Is there any edge to be had, or is nope, that market bakes that all in, irrelevant info at this point?
I think it's completely irrelevant. I mean, you might even make a case Steve Spags off a bye against Steve Wilkes might be something, but overall, if there is something, it's going to be priced in.
Okay, let's actually get into the game now and how these teams match up. I want to start with coaching. Cleve, last week we talked about head coaching aggression, and we highlighted that Dan Campbell's big edge in aggression over Kyle Shanahan might factor in. It did. If the plays had been caught, we could be talking about why the Lions got in was their aggression. Ultimately, they didn't. Kyle Shanahan is one of the most passive coaches in the NFL. Does Andy Reid have an edge as far as aggression and picking your spots on when to take a risk?
Yeah, it's pretty rare for Andy Reid to have any sort of edge on the aggression factor. He's gotten better at it. You would think with Mahomes, he would be even more aggressive, especially on fourth downs, but he's not. But he's more aggressive than Kyle Shanahan. And I posted this yesterday. I couldn't believe it. And again, some of this is circumstance based on just how games have flowed. But the Niners have not even attempted a single 2-point conversion all year this year, which is like they attempted one all of last year, and that was in their playoff game against Seattle. And so, there's just the fact that he just refuses to go for two. I'm sure there's opportunities. I think it was against Baltimore. It was against Cincinnati, where he failed the down 8 go for 2 test. So we know in that situation, like he's not going to do that. So from that perspective, I do have more faith that Andy Reid's going to be a little bit more aggressive. Just in general, Shanahan I think he cost them a Super Bowl 2 years ago.
Yeah.
When against the Rams, when he refused to go for it when it was on the other side of the 50 on 4th and short in the fourth quarter, punted it to the Rams, and the Rams ended up scoring and winning the game. So if it does come down to that, I do trust Reid a little bit more in that perspective when it comes to just pure matchups. I mean, Shanahan's awesome from play design and play calling, but I think Spagnuolo might be the best in the NFL defensively. I said last week that Spagnuolo versus McDonald were the two best, the two coordinators I would kind of, one game for my life. Those are the two guys I would pick this year. And I think, defensively and offensively, we've got the best offense and the best defense. So I think schematically it's pretty much a wash. But I think, Andy Reid versus Steve Wilks is a gigantic matchup especially with 2 weeks. Again, you talk about is the 2 weeks to prepare. Does that matter? Well, I think in this case it might, because I don't have any faith in Steve Wilks. I don't think he makes any real adjustments. He's not that kind of guy. And I think that Andy Reid, when he's got time to, an extra week to put a game plan together, I think he's got an advantage over Wilks. And I think that's, that could come into play on Sunday.
Well, let's talk about that. Suma, we talked about Andy Reid versus Mike Macdonald. Mike Macdonald eventually made adjustments, and they held the Chiefs in check in the second half. Is Steve Wilks capable of pulling together a game plan that can stifle Andy Reid's play calling, or is this like a one-sided heavyweight fight here?
I don't think so. Also, when we consider what the personnel on the field is, because that defense has not been good this year in general. So what should make me believe that Steve Wilks will somehow craft that super duper special game plan to really stymie Patrick Mahomes in that offense? I don't really see that happening. And I don't remember whether it was the players or Kyle Shanahan in the NFC Championship game, but I've read something that players or Kyle Shanahan came to Steve Wilks at some point and said, "Hey, we are playing way too much zone here. They are dinking and dunking us to death. We have to adjust something for the second half." So, not sure what to make of Steve Wilks. I think that he's probably a good players coach. Might be decent in a head coach environment, but as a DC for one game against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, I don't really trust him with this kind of personnel.
They also had that problem early in the year. Remember, he was sending too many blitzes, and they're like, "No, we like the idea of rushing with our 4 and having all this coverage back." And there was an argument about his play calling. So it isn't a first time thing. Clark, Cleveland alluded to it, that the 28-3 game against New England, the game against, Kansas City when they had Mahomes, on the ropes, and frankly, the game against the Rams in the NFC Championship game when they should have won. How does Shanahan's play calling match up against Steve Spagnuolo? It feels like Shanahan's brilliant, and then sometimes he gets a little too cute or veers off of what was working at the end of the game and ends up costing himself. How do you see that coaching matchup playing out?
I think it's a great matchup. Also, to TA's point, just for the record, Shanahan failed the down 14 test last week against Detroit. But as far as play calling goes, I think that Spagnuolo is better at sort of shutting down or slowing down elite quarterbacks. Like a lot of his signature games as a play caller, think about the Super Bowls against Tom Brady and some of the Chiefs games against some of the other AFC teams in that past few playoffs. Whereas he's not been as good historically against these sort of, really well schemed offenses with a lot of unique pieces and a quarterback that is not necessarily the entire engine, but more so just the distributor of the ball. And so I do think that this isn't a perfect matchup for Spagnuolo, but he does get 2 weeks. He has lots of film. I do think that there are some things that Purdy has put on tape that are potential weaknesses for him to exploit. And he is a really good coach. So I think given those 2 weeks, I would think that the more time Spagnuolo has to prepare, the better it is for him. Whereas Shanahan's offense is always really good. Like they kind of condense their formations and then run a lot of plays out of the same kinds of formations. I think it's pretty much the same whether you have 1 week or 2 weeks for someone like Shanahan. Whereas I think Spagnuolo has a bit more time to prepare his defense. So kind of like we've seen in these playoffs, a lot of defenses have adjusted at halftime. I kind of see that happening even before the game starts here with 2 weeks to prepare. So I like the time gap for Spagnuolo to cook something up here.
Okay, let's forget about the X's and O's for a second. Let's talk about the guys on the field. Suma, how does this San Fran offense match up against the Chiefs defense? Where are their edges? Where will they find some difficulties?
CMC.
Yeah.
So if I'm Kyle Shanahan, I'm going to approach this game at least early. We'll see what happens at some point during the game, but I think he will approach this game with a heavy dose of CMC early on early downs. Lots of 21 personnel, just running it straight up the gut, and also try to get CMC involved in the passing game. The Ravens did the complete opposite last week. Only like 5 design running back runs. At some point, they were trying to throw to the running backs in the flat. First down. Kansas City's defense is 21st in DVOA against running back passes. They have not been good against the run, especially against the kind of ones that the 49ers are playing with. 21 personnel, KC defense gives up 0.1 EPA per play and almost a 45% success rate. Niners 40% plus in 21 personnel. Also, inside zone is something that the Kansas City Chiefs are below average against. Shanahan calls inside zone as his most ran concept. And yeah, I think this has to be on early downs CMC. I'm not necessarily saying that they should go completely run heavy and ignore the passing game, but I think this is a game where Kyle Shanahan says, hey, we got CMC, we can run the ball. We are basically the only team in the league that can run the ball against stack boxes out of 21 personnel. We are so good at it. We have a guy who can really get into space against those linebackers and safeties, and this will be the CMC show from the get-go. Try to get their one game going, try to throw to him on like short routes, intermediate routes, and then basically build off of it. I think that's the best way to approach this game, because where the KC defense is absolute best at is when they know you're going to pass the ball. When Spags can really put the clamps on you, he knows like 3rd and 8, 2nd and 9, this is going to be passing down. This is where Spags is at his absolute best, especially with this kind of defense. So for Kyle Shanahan, it has to be at least early on. Get the one game going, stay out of these obvious passing situations, and then try to use all your staple play action concepts off of it.
Yeah. Cleve, I echo so much of what Suma is saying. Like when I start to think about this game, like the Chiefs are top 3 in drop back EPA and 2nd in drop back success rate. And they're like bottom, 5 or 6 in all defensive rush metrics. And yet Todd Monken had the same information that we all do. And he chose to go with not a heavy run game script. Do you think Kyle Shanahan's going to make that same mistake, or is he fairly aware that, listen, we need the biggest CMC game here to win this game?
Yeah, and I think Suma made some good points, like the fact that, I'm not a total X and O's guy, so I rely on others who do this for a living or analyze it, who I trust. And a lot of them are saying that just Spagnuolo is such a wizard. He forced the Ravens and Lamar, or confused them enough to kind of force them out of runs, and he checked into a lot of passes. So they had runs called, and he just, the way that they aligned defensively, Lamar wanted to throw, and so he kind of did the same thing last year against Jalen Hurts and that Eagles run offense. I mean, the Eagles run offense was dominant all year, and then they did nothing in the Super Bowl. But Jalen Hurts threw the ball so well down the field, it didn't really matter from the Eagles' perspective. Lamar just couldn't do the same last week. So, some of it has to be on Spagnuolo and just the way he designs what he does defensively pre snap. Now, the thing is, and I think Suma talked about it, Shanahan doesn't care. Like, he just runs his stuff. Doesn't matter what the defense is showing. The fact that they've run against the most, stacked boxes in the NFL, proves that he just doesn't care, and they do very well against it just because CMC is so good in the way they scheme things.
Yeah.
And they have such good blocking. So he's just going to run his stuff no matter what. I don't think he's going to be fooled into that. I don't think he's going to let Purdy check out of those things. He's just going to say, look, I don't care what they show pre-snap. We're going to run it at least early. And then, the fact that the one thing Suma didn't mention is, the play action game. So, San Francisco doesn't run play action at the highest rate, but they are the best at it. Purdy is, from, all the advanced metrics. He's almost 10 yards per pass attempt when he does run play action, number 1 in PFF grade. And Kansas City is actually pretty poor defending play action, 28th in success rate, 19th in EPA. So if they do get success early, even against stack boxes or wherever Spagnuolo plays it with CMC, I know that people say that, the run game doesn't affect play action. I think it might in this case, just because, Kansas City isn't very good at it. And if they're running very well against them early, I think it's going to have a little bit of an effect. So I think that's a way, if they are able to establish it early and then, run play action off of it, and then maybe mix in some Debo screens and sweeps and all those sorts of things. I think it can get to the Kansas City defense. So that's kind of how I see it. I don't think just straight drop backs with Purdy against those corners outside is going to win. I think it's going to be all the kind of offshoots, the misdirections, the screens, the runs to McCaffrey, and that's probably the best route. And I think that's how he's going to approach it.
Clark, are you familiar with like poker? You go all in with a hand, and you have a redraw in case you don't have the strongest hand. You can still backdoor a flush or backdoor a straight. The concept is, when you bet the Chiefs, you're obviously hoping that the game script favors them. But if it goes wrong, you trust that you have Mahomes at least with a shot to come back. It's easy to say San Fran's going to establish the run and play from ahead and really be physical. But what happens if, you get the 1 or 2 bounces against you and now you're in a hole? What's your level of faith Brock Purdy can be sitting there down 10 second half of the game and make the comeback?
Not very high. So I went back and looked at Purdy's. One of the things I've been studying this week is Purdy's career, basically. He's played 27 games in his career, started 27 games, and only 6 of those 27 came against a defense that finished top 10 in both overall and pass defense on the year. Last year, he played against Washington, Philadelphia for like 5 snaps, and Dallas. And then this year, he played against Cleveland, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. In those 6 games, he has never once had above 50% success rate per dropback. His overall EPA per play in those 6 games is negative 0.07. His success rate is 41% on dropbacks in those 6 games. Now, that doesn't mean that since the Chiefs are a top 10 defense, both overall and against the pass, that Purdy is automatically going to suck this game. It's not how it works. But I think it illustrates somewhat of a small sample size. You can't draw conclusions from a 6-game sample size. But what you can say is that we haven't seen enough of Brock Purdy to know that he's good enough to will his team in a comeback against a good defense. He did it against the Packers. He did it against the Lions. Neither of those defenses are particularly good, whereas the Chiefs are, especially against the pass. If Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel aren't able to get open against the Chiefs corners, I don't know that the 49ers have the type of offense to just will themselves back into a game that they're losing. So I do think it's very important for the 49ers to maintain a lead or keep the game close to where every play out of each formation is on the table. Otherwise, I do think there's a chance this could get out of hand for the 49ers if things don't go well for them. The other thing is Brock Purdy is sometimes described as a game manager, which is completely ludicrous, not just because he's better than what that term implies. He is a good quarterback, but because that's just not his style of play at all. He does not give up on plays. He does not throw the ball away. He insists on making something happen every time. And that's part of the reason why he's been so drastically less successful against these good defenses, is because when things aren't there, he's not taking the safe, I'm going to throw to this guy's feet to just get to the next play. He's running around trying to make something happen, throwing back across his body. We saw it against the Ravens. He threw it back across his body. The ball got tipped up for an interception. He did it against the Jaguars and got away with it in the end zone to Ayuk. But if the defender was paying attention, that would have been an easy pick. And so what I worry about with Purdy is if he doesn't give up on these plays, he might turn some could be 0-yard plays into actual turnovers or negative plays. So those are the things I'd be concerned about if I was on the 49ers and they got behind. I wouldn't have a lot of confidence in them coming back.
Real quick interlude. I think that's a good point by Clark. Only 6 games. I mean, he only played 3 games this year against a top 10 defense. It's actually second lowest, I think, in the NFL. So it's, the problem is you're dealing with small samples in the NFL. Just for almost anything you look at is small sample in one season. So, and there is context in all that because, the Browns game was rainy, it was a little windy, and Debo and Trent Williams got hurt. That's tough. The Ravens game, I mean, he played poorly, but there was 3 tipped interceptions. Who knows what would have happened? I mean, I feel like a lot of the Purdy stuff, a lot of defenders drop interceptions against Purdy for whatever reason. So who knows what would have happened if, the Ravens defenders dropped. So it's hard to decipher for sure how meaningful it is. And is it, just coincidence that he didn't play well? I mean, the only 2 games all year that he had a less than 40% success rate were the Ravens and the Browns. So it's it's hard to know what to make of that. But I do think that it should at least be noted. And I think it was a good job in bringing that up.
That's 2 interesting points. I remember back to last playoff run where I thought Brock was getting away with a lot of bad throws and not being punished. And I kept betting some 2 INT props at Brock Purdy on some good prices. And then I thought in the game against Philly, against a hockey defense, I was going to get rewarded. And then he got hurt, so he couldn't fulfill the number that I wanted. Suma, I actually wanted to dovetail into Kansas City's offense and how they match up against San Francisco, because it's not as if Kansas City has suddenly found their flow again and are firing as a top 5 offense. What's happened is they've cut out all the turnover-worthy stuff. Like Mahomes has not had a turnover-worthy pass this entire playoff run, and basically they're playing perfectly clean football and not killing themselves a la 5 turnover game against Denver. What do you think this Chiefs offense looks like matching up against the Niners defense? Where's their edges? Where will they find difficulties?
So good point on the cutting down on the turnovers. I think Eric Eager has said it 8 times on the Forward Progress channel since I think week 18 of the regular season, that the Chiefs got extremely unlucky on both sides when it comes to generating turnovers on defense and committing turnover on offense. I just remember that Raiders game on Christmas Eve or something, where it was completely bananas. And yes, they have basically gone completely clean on offense. I think against Miami, they were fortunate that Miami had zero edge rushers, banged up on defense. Bills also banged up over the middle of the field. And they just basically ran an offense that played into those weaknesses and just executed at a very, very high level. And the same we saw, I think, in the first quarter and a half against the Ravens. And then at some point, Mike McDonald took over. And yes, we can make the case that the Chiefs maybe went a little bit softer, a little bit more conservative in the second half. But Mike McDonald did something. I have not watched the All 22. Maybe Clark did, but something has to have been there that Mike McDonald did very well, holding the Chiefs to 3 points on, I think, 8 drives, excluding that last drive where he threw that bomb to MVS. So something has been there.
Yep.
But now I think we are getting a defense that is more towards Miami and Buffalo than the Ravens, because I don't think that Steve Wilkes is close to Mike McDonald when it comes to game planning and in-game adjustments, and also the player quality on the field. Yes, the Niners on paper have a great defensive line. We don't see it often this season. Nick Bosa is a great pass rusher. you can run at him. Chase Young was, I don't know what that was last week. I mean,
I'm embarrassed as an Ohio State alum of Chase Young.
That's
Really
yes.
Deion Sanders' approach to tackling in the run game. Don't get yourself hurt. He made a business decision.
Yes, absolute business decision. So we are looking at a defensive line that is good on paper, not that dominant on the actual field. Great middle of the field defense. Also got exposed at times by the Lions last week. And what the issue for the Niners is that they don't have the talent at cornerback and safety right now to have a defensive line that cannot generate consistent pressure. So there's some kind of a disconnect right now where they cannot get home up front, and the coverage unit is not good enough to hold up on the secondary. And for as many issues that the Chiefs had at wide receiver, Travis Kelce looked a little bit washed at times, but he's been back for the playoffs. I think that the Chiefs, with 2 weeks to prepare, with potentially Kadarius Toney back into the game plan, I think that they have enough horses that they can schematically attack this 49ers defense. Patrick Mahomes, I think, will generate or create enough space in somewhat condensed pockets to make plays down the field. I think that they will try to maybe look for 2, 3, 4 outside targets for MVS, because that's where the 49ers are weak, and that's how the Chiefs got them last year. Don't throw at Fred Warner, but other than that, I think that the Chiefs, with 2 weeks to prepare, should be able to run the ball a little bit, especially towards the outside. What the Lions have done very well last week, we talked about it. Chase Young and Nick Bosa are not at this point in time the dominant edge setters against the run. So we might see some Isaiah Pacheco once that he breaks to the outside, and then I think it will be the Patrick Mahomes show and dissecting this 49ers zone coverage.
Clark, I want to ask you about the concept of like recency bias and short-term sample size versus season-long data. For a majority of the season, San Fran was seen as a great defense and maybe one of the best, even though maybe some of the smarter people knew some of those metrics were lying, right, and situational. And for a majority of the season, the Chiefs' offense was washed and old, and Kelce has nothing left in the tank, and they can't move the ball, and they didn't get him enough weapons. And over the last 3 weeks, perception-wise, has kind of flipped on both, right? It's San Fran now has a lot of vulnerable things, and it's because the Ravens moved the ball on them and the Packers and the Lions. So there's reasons for it. We didn't just come up with these theories out of nowhere. And the Chiefs have played mistake-free football and look like a pretty good offense again. My question to you is, has the sentiment flipped too far? And is there some level of regression that could come with KC's offense and then positive regression from San Fran's defense?
My answer is the opposite for the two questions. So I think, we look at recency bias as the last 3 weeks versus the regular season. But I think with the Chiefs offense in particular, there was a recency bias thing with this regular season versus, Mahomes' entire career. Like, he's operating with the same head coach. Like, granted, they don't have Eric Bieniemy, but I think between the same head coach, Andy Reid, play caller, and Patrick Mahomes, pretty much the same weapons as they had last year when they rolled to another Super Bowl victory. If anything, they're probably better this year, because at the level that Rashee Rice is playing at now, at this point in his rookie season, I think they probably have an overall better group than they had last year. So for me, the recency bias was, okay, well, Toney dropped that third down. MVS dropped that easy touchdown against the Eagles. Toney's offsides negated a big play for the Chiefs. It's not just been that. Patrick Mahomes has had a very high drop rate on his passes this year. Yep. There have been a lot of penalties that have negated, big gains in key spots. For me, the recency bias was saying that the Chiefs' offense was bad. By my metrics, they were never bad this year. And so I, kind of anticipated them putting it together like they have been. Whereas I think the 49ers is the opposite. Their defense has been good. These players have been good for several years. We know what they're capable of. So for them to have a few tough games, especially against Green Bay and Detroit, two teams with elite offensive lines, it doesn't knock me so far off my priors for the 49ers defense that I think they suddenly suck. Like, I think these guys are pretty good. And against the Ravens, they actually did do pretty well on defense. The reason the Ravens ran out to score in that game was because Purdy turned the ball over 4 times and they got a bunch of short fields. So I'm not dinging the 49ers defense for that Ravens game. I am dinging them for the Lions and the Packers games, but also recognizing how good those offensive lines are. As for what Suma said, I think this matters in terms of what the Ravens did in the second half. What I saw in the film was the Ravens basically saw that Mahomes has shifted as a player to a much more conservative, much more willing to take what the defense gives, avoid mistakes kind of player. And so at halftime, they said, all right, what we're going to do, you can see this on the film, is we're going to make sure that nothing is open downfield and goad him into taking the flat route or whatever. There's always an option on the Chiefs passing plays for like okay, no one's open, I'm going to dump it down and let this guy make a play. Okay. But their focus was force Mahomes to take the easy one. And as soon as he starts making that throw, we are gunning for that guy to tackle him and reduce the yak. And that's what they did to slow down the Chiefs. I don't know that the 49ers have the secondary to replicate that. So I think if they try that, Mahomes might still throw it downfield and find guys open. So we'll see if that works. But I think the big question here is whether or not the 49ers can actually cover downfield. If they can't cover downfield, I think Mahomes will have a good day. If they can, I think it's going to be a lot of dink and dunk, a lot of slow drives, avoiding mistakes, converting third downs, kind of like we started off with the Ravens game last week. And I think that's kind of what decides this side of the matchup.
Okay. Great points. Cleve, I want to ask you that. You said you have some stuff on San Francisco's defense, but before you do that, I want to ask you a quick question. You always look at like, what's the one way this game unravels for both teams? And you like, how could this game get away from the Chiefs? And I think back to the Tampa Bay Super Bowl, and I want to play a clip here from Nick Bosa for a second. And I want to ask you if you think this is the one scenario where maybe the game unravels for it. Jason, if you can pull up that Nick Bosa clip.
You watch them on film. Taylor's, I think, leads the NFL with a ton of penalties. Anything stand out when you watch them? They hold a lot.
Here's why I wanted to play that for you. Joe Thuney is doubtful for this game, and Jawan Taylor and Donovan Smith have not been very good tackles this year. The Tampa Bay game flipped because they dominated the line of scrimmage. Mahomes was under fire, and it all fell apart. Is there a world where San Fran's D-line dominates so much that it completely throws the Kansas City offense off kilter? Is that the one way that maybe the San Fran defense can dominate? Or do you think that's not a thing that can happen in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's anything could happen in any of these games. I mean, I think if it were to happen, that is absolutely would be the way. I would say the one difference, well, there's two differences between this game and the Tampa matchup a few years ago. I mean, you look back, that O-line for Kansas City was just, I mean, it was all backups. There was like no starters on that O-line. This, maybe Taylor and Smith aren't, elite tackles, but they're still, above average, and, they're starting tackles in this league. Back then it was pretty bad, just based on all the injuries. So there is a difference there. Also, Kansas City has a much better run game. I mean, you can actually run the ball with Pacheco. I think Kansas City was still had Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Yeah. I think it was his rookie year back then. So, he's not an in-between tackles guy. So at least if it was a case where the line is getting beat, you can at least attack San Francisco through the run game if they have to. But the thing is, I mean, Mahomes is so good at avoiding sacks. I of all the quarterbacks out there, I trust Mahomes even with a subpar O-line if it's a bad matchup. So I do think that they'll be okay in that regard. I mean, if you watch the game last year, it's pretty incredible what Mahomes did to this defense a year ago in the regular season. San Francisco had all their starters in there. They had Hufanga in that game, and he just completely decimated them. It was the single best game from an EPA perspective that any quarterbacks put on the Niners defense in the last 3 years. And it's like not even close. Like the difference between him and Colt McCoy, shockingly, was number 2. The gap between those two guys is like just enormous. So, he has history with this defensive line. He can get away, he can scramble, but I do think at least they have that counter punch if they have to, in terms of using Pacheco, because they did not have that in that Super Bowl a couple of years ago. But what I wanted to say is, a couple things with Kansas City. I think, and you know, Clark did a good job of, you know, kind of sticking with his guns on KC's offense. I think we were blinded a little bit. And look, when there was a couple of weeks left in the season, we were talking about Kansas City getting the number 1 seed, and that was the best bet on the board. And we looked foolish the next week. I think when the Raiders kind of blew them up
on Christmas,
yeah, on Christmas. But when you look at the season, I mean, first of all, when there's only been 14 games where say only, but there's been 14 games where Kelsey, Chris Jones, and Donovan Smith played, because there's been, you know, a handful of games where one or both were missing, especially the opener against Detroit, where both Kelsey and Jones were missing. I mean, they're 12-2 in those games when all of those guys start and finish. So, you know, when they do have a full complement, they've obviously have that this week. You know, they've been essentially an elite team from that perspective. You know, you look at the opening game loss to Detroit. That was so fluky. The fact that Tony dropped an easy catch, it turns into a pick six. You know, and again, no Chris Jones, no Kelsey. Nine out of 10 times the Chiefs probably win that game outright. You know, they lost the Philly game where MVS drops the easy touchdown, in the Kansas City Arrowhead Lights, which have proven to be a problem historically. You know, that was pretty fluky there. You look at the Buffalo game with the Kelsey, you know, lateral, and the Tony, you know, going off sides, like pretty fluky stuff. They're 23rd in EPA lost on offense this year in the regular season, which, you know, is pretty rare for a team to have that negative of an EPA situation and to still be in the Super Bowl, which tells you what they've overcome. And the fact that they haven't, I mean, not only has Mahomes not turned it over in the postseason, he has 0 turnover-worthy plays. It's not like he's getting lucky with drops or anything like that. So I don't think he's playing mistake-free football, mainly because, you know, Tony's not in there, you know, getting passes deflected, and some of that positive regression is going their way. So I think that some of the turnovers masked what we thought of their offense. I think the fact that, you know, there's obviously a bunch of drop passes that Clark mentioned. I think 29, the second most in the NFL. You know, the drop passes were an issue. You know, they had obviously with Kelsey missing the opener, you know, that hurt them against the Lions. Like there's all these little things that if a couple of bounces go the other way, we're still looking at them as the number 1 or number 2 seed. And this was kind of, you know, preordained that they were going to get here all along. So I don't think anything that's going on in the postseason is really, you know, fluky per se. It's just really just, you know, everything kind of balancing out to where it should be. And the stats I was going to talk about with San Francisco, and again, you know, we can cherry pick all day long, but I think anyone who's watched this Niners defense last couple of years recognizes that Hufanga at safety is a real impactful player. He's probably maybe behind Warner and Bosa, the best player on that defense. And it's just, he makes so many plays over the middle of the field, and just, you know, I think he jumped in front of a Mahomes pass last year in the regular season and picked him off early. So we know he's impactful. And since he got hurt in week 12, the San Francisco defense went from being the 5th best defense in EPA for the first 11 weeks of the year to being 23rd since then. 4 of their last 5 opponents have generated a positive EPA after only allowing 4 the first 14 weeks of the season. So, you know, there's clearly, you know, has been a shift. And again, I can't totally, blame or give the credit to Hufanga, but I think that has been impactful. And the fact that they've played a lot better offenses since then, you know, I think it has to be recognized that, you know, something's going on in that regard. And I think that this defense, again, with, you know, Steve Wilkes is not the greatest at adjusting. So when you don't have a coordinator who can make up for some of that, I do think some of the negatives do shine here. And, you know, they've played a lot of games when they've been ahead. So some of those numbers are also inflated just because when they've you know, gone out to all these leads, and then they can just, you know, play back and let their pass rush really dominate bad offensive line. So all of that, you know, I think you can kind of toss in the equation. I don't think San Francisco really, when facing a quarterback like Mahomes and an offense, you know, with multiple weeks to prepare, I don't think they're going to play like a top 5 level defense. I think they're kind of much worse than that, as long as that offensive line does hold up.
Yeah, for sure. Also, just don't throw at Charvarius Ward. The other 2 guys are so bad and are such liabilities. Why would you throw at the one guy that's capable? All right, I got 3 quick questions. I want quick answers, and then we're going to talk about Taylor Swift because I can't help myself.
Oh, no.
Suma, do you remember last year the line opened up and we took Philadelphia money early on, and then it was kind of sitting around 2.5, and nobody had put Kansas City money in. I think part of it was people were waiting to see if a 3 would pop up. And then eventually when they realized it wasn't, you saw some KC money at the close and we got closer to a 1. That's kind of where the line is sitting right now. And do you think there is still some KC money out there that's hiding?
Potentially. So when I look at the odds board, and you don't just look at all the offshores and also some other books, it seems like it's quietly, slightly leaning towards a 2.5 rather than a 1.5.
Yeah.
But to be honest, gut feel, I simply don't know. But gut feel is that at 2.5, there would be appetite for KC to swing it back.
Yeah, feels like that too. I think there's appetite at 2, but I think people want to see if a 2.5 will pop up. Clark, we kind of alluded to it, like Mahomes has the ability to come back, and maybe Purdy doesn't have that same ability. Cottage 11,100 asks, dovetail on that George question regarding dominant matchup. Gun to your head, which team do you pick with an alt minus 13.5 line? KC's the only team capable of a blowout in this game, right?
I mean, like Cleve said, anything can happen, right?
Yeah, but the more likely, right? Like if
absolutely. I actually did play Chiefs alts because I think that there are questions about Brock Purdy that we haven't answered yet. And while I think there's a good chance that the answers to the questions are yes, he's good, and that's reflected in the line. If the answer is he does struggle when his back's against the wall and the receivers are covered and plan A is not working, then I think that there's material upside for the Chiefs to kind of put that foot on the, on the Niners' heads. I also think that Purdy is much more turnover prone than his numbers would suggest.
Mhm.
And so I think that creates a lot of variance. I also think that he can make plays downfield, but what the Chiefs have done all year is prevent those big plays. So if Purdy's forcing it into coverage, that's a double-edged sword that could go really well for the Niners, get some defensive pass interference, that kind of stuff, but it could also go very poorly. So I do think the Chiefs are the team if you're playing alts.
Cleve, I want to ask you about the total. It was at 47.5 for most of the day, and probably still is, but some books went to 48. Two offenses with exploitable matchups in the dome. And yet I don't think we're going to catch this influx of over money. KC has quietly become the biggest under team in the NFL. Like 14 of their 20 games went under the closing line. They average 6.9 points below the closing total, like a whole touchdown off market. Next closest team is like 3 points off. This is obviously a bit of Mahomes' reputation, but Mahomes has been settling with underneath stuff, and then defensively they don't give up the big plays. And if we expect the heavy dose of CMC, this might be a slower game than people realize, right?
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. This is hard because this is a single island game. Things happen in the Super Bowl that always surprise people. It's like rarely does the script go as planned. I've looked back. Actually, I had my analyst. We went back to 2000 and all Super Bowls, and like the single highest, the single player prop amongst the like standard player props that have gone over the most is quarterback pass attempts. 70% of the time they go over. It just tells you. And the funny thing is, yardage is actually much lower, so they're not efficient. But there's just this game, for whatever reason, brings out more passing. Fluky plays happen. We see, weird stuff happen all the time. So I don't know with the total, and it's the last game of the year. You got 2 weeks to prepare. You empty all the bag, the bag of tricks. Teams are never kind of settling late. Like you're not ever benching your starters at any point in the Super Bowl, no matter what the score is. So like this can always lend itself to an over. So even if you think that, the game script is under, those sort of things can happen. Also, you have to remember, like a team like Kansas City's played 3 straight games, and actually every game at the end of the year outdoors in cold weather. And so a lot of that, a lot of the offensive numbers and just the total scoring gets depressed in that environment. And I think that happens a lot in the Super Bowl where you get, maybe not, obviously you don't have that with San Francisco, although the Green Bay game, 2 weeks ago in the rain might be a different story. But in general, you get these teams that are playing cold weather outdoor games for, 2 months to end a year. And then all of a sudden they get in the dome or a warm weather and just things, blossom and it changes things. I mean, if you look at, again, whatever you think of trends, whatnot, 8 of the last 12 Super Bowls with a total of 48 or less have gone over the over under by almost 6 points per game. So we have seen kind of lower total, and I say lower, but like under 50 kind of skew towards the over, and pretty substantially. It's not even close. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I don't have a strong opinion either way. I can see this, being lower scoring, but I just think that you got the best quarterback that, maybe we've ever seen in our lifetime on one side against a leaky defense. You've got the number one offense, maybe one of the best offenses we've seen by the numbers in the last, decade facing off. It's hard to take. I don't care what the defenses are doing. It's hard to feel confident in an under in the 40s. Just my opinion, but doesn't mean I like the over. It just means I'm not confident on a low scoring game.
You said these games don't go according to script, but the networks think this game went according to script. Getting Taylor Swift in the final game, the ratings, it's going to break the ratings record. I think both AFC and NFC championship games were off the charts. Let's talk about Taylor Swift props quickly, just because listen, if a book's not doing Taylor Swift props, they are stupid. I'm going to run through the ones on Pinnacle, and you guys are going to tell me. I don't want some great analysis. What you think's the better bet, okay? Number of times Taylor Swift is shown live on the broadcast. Over 5 TV camera shots, minus 175. Under 5 TV camera shots, plus 120. This is the over, right?
Over.
Clark, are you in the over train here or what?
I mean, there's a sneaky fade the Chiefs angle on under. Like if not doing anything on offense, then there's fewer times to show her. But yeah, over.
I think they're going to show her on every Kelsey catch and every touchdown scored. Cleve, you agree?
Yeah, absolutely over. I mean, I would love to do go back to Game Pass and look at the last handful of games to see how many times they show her. But I feel like in the Super Bowl, it's definitely going to be over.
All right. Primary color of top when first shown at red is minus 750. Any other color plus 376. What
there is value. I see value on white. Why can't she have a red jacket and white shirt?
Right? Because they specified the top. I kind of like any other color here.
That's a good point. Is top jacket or are we talking top shirt? Like what do we need?
We need the
Pinnacle weigh in on. I need the terminology. If you're just talking, when you say top, you're just talking about a shirt. I'd say white, and then maybe she has a red Chiefs jacket on. That'd be
in fact, I think the Chiefs are wearing white in this game. If I she might be wearing Kelsey's. No, they're wearing red.
No, Chiefs are wearing red.
So she can wear Kelsey's red jersey, isn't she? Yeah. You know what? Let's do one more. Who will say exactly Taylor Swift first? I love this. Jim Nantz or Tony Romo? How is Jim Nantz the champ? Tony's got to be minus 300 here. There's no way he's not going to do it.
Well, I think Nance is going to lead, so he'll probably his first the first words of the broadcast
will be Taylor Swift.
It off. I think he's going to say it in the first, the first segment before he even hands it off to Romo. So that's probably why he's favored.
Maybe his opening line will be.
Romo uses all kinds of weird nicknames and stuff. Who knows what Romo's going to call her?
I might call her T Swizzle.
Yeah.
So Suma, I know you love this stuff. Who would you bet right here?
I would probably still go with Nance. Can you open the odds of shown live holding a drink during broadcast?
Yep.
Oh yes, minus 115.
Right? Yes, minus 115.
Yeah, of course she is. I going back to what Jim Nance is going to open with. I think his opening sentence is going to be Taylor Swift is in the building, and we also have a football game today, guys. One last question. It's a Super Bowl. Obviously, we cheer for our money, but let's just pretend you're just a fan at the moment. Who do you want to win this Super Bowl? Clark, I'm going to start with you because I think the answer is pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Chiefs fan, so go Chiefs. I'll actually be at the game, so I'm excited to.
Man, congrats! That's awesome.
Yeah,
nice.
Watch this in person. I've never been more excited about anything sports related in my entire life. I've been a Chiefs fan for a long time. Patrick Mahomes is obviously my favorite player. This is like a dream for me.
Nice.
Cleve,
congrats.
Cleve, I know it's a dream to you just to see Cleveland in the Super Bowl one day. Who are you cheering for in this game?
I'm going to cheer for the Chiefs. And just a little bonus, exact score just for GRP purposes. We're going to go 31-17 Chiefs. And so I'm going to hit that minus 13.5 alt for Clark. We're going to, it's going to push the total. But I posted it, I swear, for fun, just because GRP made me do it. I went back and looked at every NFL game with the parameters of 1.5 or 1 to 2.5 point spread, 46 to 47.5 point total. And the most common result has been 31-17. The most common score, actually the two most common team scores in the last 25 years of the Super Bowl has been 31-17. So it's destined to be 31-17. And you can, when you guys hit your 140 to 1 or whatever it is shot, we'll come back here and we'll celebrate. But that's what I'm going to do.
Pizzola says he recorded a video on the Taylor Swift props, major value on any other color. You know what I'm going to watch? I just want to hear what his handicapping process is on all of these. Suma, who are you cheering for in this game?
Wait a minute. Is Rob gonna spoil the national anthem too? I know he's anti that. Is he gonna spoil the other color? I don't like this, Rob.
Wow. Suma, who are you cheering for?
I'm cheering for Clark being at the game and rooting for his Chiefs. To be honest, if there's one guy that I would like to win a Super Bowl, it's Kyle Shanahan.
Me too.
So I think he just deserves one at this point. But if I had to put money down right now, I would probably still take the Chiefs.
I think there's something poetic about Andy Reid finally got his Super Bowl, and he was the coach most overdue for one when he did it against Shanahan. And this would complete the circle of life. But also, Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, there's a lot of really good guys that it's like, I'd like to see them win. I think I'll be cheering for San Fran, but I am not going to be upset by any result. Guys, thank you so much for doing this. As a reminder, Forward Progress is going to be doing a prop extravaganza on Wednesday from 12 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Rob Pizzola, 5 hours, joined up by the craziest lineup of guests. I saw the list. It's insane. All of us are going to be there at some point, as well as like 25 other guests. That's it for me. Thanks to Cleve TA. Thanks to Suma. Thanks to Sharp Clark. Thanks to producer Jason. Thanks to you, the audience. And we'll see you Wednesday once again for the prop extravaganza. Until next time.